You got deeper into drink.
Yeah.
Got into drugs because he was.
Right. I was trying to help him get off drugs, and when I was trying to help him, then I got off.
At 67 years old, a woman once written off as a burned-out has-been is standing on stages singing to sold-out crowds, running a thriving tequila business, and holding a Grammy Award that took her 48 years to win. If you think you remember Tanya Tucker as just another faded country star from the 70s, what happened to her in the decades since will genuinely surprise you. Long before the world knew her name, Tanya Denise Tucker was a restless little girl in Seminole, Texas, born on October 10, 1958, the youngest of 3 children raised by a heavy equipment operator named Bo Tucker. The family moved constantly, chasing work across the Southwest, and one of those stops, a small town called Willcox, Arizona, changed everything. The town had exactly one radio station, and it played country music around the clock. For a child already drawn to music, that constant soundtrack became something like a calling. By the age of 8, Tanya was telling anyone who would listen that she was going to be a country singer, and unlike most childhood declarations, this one never faded. Her father believed her. More than that, he built his life around making it happen. Bo Tucker became her manager, her fiercest advocate, and the man who pushed doors open that should have stayed closed to a young teenager. At 13, Tanya landed a small role in the 1972 Robert Redford film Jeremiah Johnson, but acting was never the real goal. With a homemade demo tape and her father's relentless determination, she found her way to producer Billy Sherrill, one of the most powerful men in Nashville, and signed with Columbia Records before she had even finished middle school. Her label, worried the public wouldn't accept a song about heartbreak sung by a child, initially tried to downplay her age. It didn't matter. When her debut single, Delta Dawn, climbed into the country top 10 in early 1972, and audiences learned the powerful, aching voice belonged to a 13-year-old girl, the fascination only intensified. Within a year, she had 2 number-1 hits, What's Your Mama's Name and Blood Red and Going Down, and a career that was moving faster than anyone, including Tanya herself, could fully process. What came next still unsettles people who hear the story for the first time. At 15, she recorded Would You Lay With Me in a Field of Stone, a song written by outlaw songwriter David Allan Coe, filled with a sensuality that made many listeners deeply uncomfortable given the singer's age. Tanya never apologized for it. She described the song as something tender, almost like a wedding vow, and insisted the discomfort said more about the listener than about her. It was a defining pattern that would follow her for years, a girl navigating adult material, adult attention, and adult judgment long before she was legally an adult herself. She later revealed that even Elvis Presley had shown interest in her as a teenager, inviting her to his Las Vegas shows, before stepping back once he understood how young she truly was. By 16, record labels were fighting over her contract, and she eventually left Columbia for a reported $1 million deal with MCA, negotiating life-changing money while still years away from being able to vote. By 1978, at 18, Tanya made a decision that shocked the conservative wing of country music. She released the album TNT, leaning hard into rock and roll, posing on the cover in tight red leather. It was a deliberate rejection of the sweet child star image that had defined her, a declaration that she intended to control her own image, whatever the traditionalists thought. The album went gold. She once said, with a mixture of pride and regret, that not even Johnny Cash generated headlines quite the way she did. That kind of life looked thrilling from a distance, but it came at a steep personal cost, one that would soon become impossible to hide. Behind the reputation for wildness was something far more painful, profound loneliness. Tanya has spoken candidly over the years about how life on the road wore her down, how she performed to screaming crowds 2 shows a night and then returned to an empty hotel room where none of that noise or love followed her inside. She began drinking heavily in her late teens, and when she moved to Los Angeles in 1978 hoping to break into pop music, the crossover never fully materialized. What did happen was that she got swept into the city's nightlife, describing herself later as the wildest thing out there, someone who could outlast and outdrink anyone in the room. Her romantic life became tabloid fodder, linked at various points to Merle Haggard, Miami Vice star Don Johnson, and pop singer Andy Gibb. But one relationship defined this era more than any other, and it nearly broke her. In the early 1980s, in her early 20s, Tanya began a fiery and heavily publicized affair with Glen Campbell, the superstar behind Rhinestone Cowboy, 22 years her senior and freshly out of a marriage. Their on-stage chemistry, captured in a 1980 duet on the Bobby Darin classic Dream Lover, was undeniable. Off-stage, the relationship was chaotic, marked by heavy substance abuse on both sides and a serious imbalance in power and age. Campbell reportedly threw her a $57,000 birthday party, and the two were briefly engaged, but the relationship also turned violent, and Tucker later sued him over an incident in which he allegedly knocked out one of her front teeth. The affair lasted roughly 15 months before collapsing. Years later, in his 1994 autobiography Rhinestone Cowboy, Campbell described the relationship coldly, calling it a kind of insanity he prayed to move past. Tucker remembered it differently, calling him the great love of her life while acknowledging with painful honesty that she had been far too young for a man like him. When Campbell died of Alzheimer's disease on August 8, 2017, that old, complicated bond still lived somewhere inside her. By the time the Campbell relationship ended in 1982, Tanya's career was sliding fast. A move to Arista Records left her creatively adrift, and she spiraled into roughly 5 years of heavy drinking and cocaine use. Her own father delivered the harshest truth, telling her plainly that her reputation had made new record deals nearly impossible to secure. People in Nashville, watching a woman not yet 25, spoke about her as though her story had already ended. But her family refused to let that happen. In 1988, they confronted her and urged her into treatment, and she checked into the Betty Ford Center, the recovery clinic founded by the former First Lady. That decision changed the entire direction of her life. The comeback that followed was staggering. In 1986, she signed with Capitol Records, and One Love at a Time put her back on the charts. Her album Girls Like Me produced 4 top 10 singles that same year, and Just Another Love gave her a first #1 hit since 1976. Then in 1988, she scored 3 separate #1 country hits, I Won't Take Less Than Your Love, If It Don't Come Easy, and Strong Enough to Bend, followed by an astonishing run of 8 consecutive top 10 singles into 1989. And in 1991, in one of those dramatic coincidences that seemed to define her entire life, she won the Country Music Association's Female Vocalist of the Year award on the very same night she gave birth to her son, Bo Grayson. Motherhood, like everything else in Tanya's life, happened entirely on her own terms. She never married, raising her first 2 children, daughter Presley Tanita and son Bo Grayson, with actor Ben Reed without ever pursuing a wedding. Her third child, Layla LaCosta, arrived through another unexpected turn. Just days before she was set to marry longtime partner Jerry Lasseter in 1999, she discovered she was pregnant and called off the wedding rather than walk down the aisle expecting. In 2005, she opened her unconventional family life to television audiences through the TLC reality series Tuckerville, showing fans the humor and grit behind single parenthood at the center of a musical dynasty. Through the 1990s, hits kept coming, but by the early 2000s, the momentum slowed. Her 2002 album Tanya would remain her last collection of original material for 17 years. She had become, in the eyes of much of the industry, a legacy act rather than a current force, and a poorly timed 2017 tribute single to Glen Campbell, released the day before his funeral amid confusion over promised charity proceeds, only deepened the sense that her story had quietly closed. Then came the twist almost nobody saw coming. Shooter Jennings, son of outlaw legend Waylon Jennings, wanted to produce a new Tanya Tucker record and reached out to singer-songwriter Brandi Carlile, who had idolized Tucker since childhood. What followed was an act of genuine generosity from a younger generation of artists. Carlile, alongside longtime collaborators Phil and Tim Hanseroth, wrote songs specifically for Tucker's aged, weathered voice, honoring the very qualities that had once been dismissed. The result, While I'm Livin', released in 2019, was her first original album in 17 years, and it stunned critics and longtime fans alike. At the 2020 Grammy Awards, at 61 years old, Tanya Tucker won Best Country Album and Best Country Song, her first Grammy wins ever, 48 years after she first started recording. The momentum has never really stopped since. In 2022, the documentary The Return of Tanya Tucker, featuring Brandi Carlile, was released by Sony Pictures Classics, earning praise from the New York Times for the emotional force still present in her voice. In 2023, she released Sweet Western Sound, again with Carlile and Jennings, and that same year was inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame, cementing her place among the genre's permanent greats. She made her acting debut in 2022's A Nashville Country Christmas alongside Keith Carradine, launched her own tequila brand, Cosa Salvaje, into more than a dozen states and Canada, and opened a themed cantina in Nashville in 2024, the same year she received the Susan G. Komen Promise Award for her breast cancer philanthropy. Today, Tanya Tucker still tours, still commands a stage with the same fearless presence that first startled Nashville when she was 13 years old, and often performs alongside her own children. She is living proof that a story written off far too early can still find its truest chapter decades later, carrying every scar, every regret, and every triumph into a voice that, by all accounts, has only grown richer with time.